Hi friends, today we're jumping into Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz, Chapter 5. Okay, how to utilize the power of rational thinking. Okay, so many patients are plainly disappointed when I prescribe something as simple as using their God-given power of reason as a method of changing negative beliefs and behaviors. And he says that they think it's naive, like, come on, guy, but he says, but it works. Okay, so he's gonna jump right into this. This is pretty important right off the bat. There is a widely accepted fallacy that rational, logical, conscious thinking has no power over unconscious processes and mechanisms, and that to change negative beliefs, feelings, or behaviors, it is necessary to dig down and dredge up material from the unconscious. Okay, so he's going to start showing you why your rational, logical, conscious thinking actually plays a key point in all of this. Okay, so your automatic mechanism, or what the Freudians like to call the unconscious, is absolutely impersonal. Impersonal, huge. So it's only going to take whatever you're putting in it. So if you're putting a whole bunch of junk stuff in it, you're going to get a bunch of junk stuff out. It's not actually trying to self-sabotage you. If you're self-sabotaging, it's because you have those beliefs in it. You already put those beliefs in it, but we'll get to that. Okay, so it operates as a machine and has no will of its own. It always tries to react appropriately to your current beliefs and interpretations concerning the current environment. It always seeks to give you appropriate feelings and to accomplish the goals which you consciously determine upon. So two key things right there is appropriate feelings. Trust your feelings. Like, your feelings they're there for a reason. Okay. And then the second thing is accomplish the goals which you consciously determine upon. You are actually setting your own goals, whether you believe it or not. And he's going to get onto that too. So it works only upon the data which you feed it in the forms of ideas, beliefs, interpretations, and opinions. Okay. So it is conscious thinking, which is the control knob of your unconscious mind. It was by conscious thought, perhaps even irrational or unrealistic, right? But it was that conscious thought that the unconscious machine developed its negative and inappropriate reaction patterns, and it is by that conscious, rational thought that the automatic reaction patterns can be changed. Okay, so Dr. Late A. Schinder, he helps unhappy, neurotic people regain the joy of living, and one of his keys was something he called conscious thought control. And he says, this is the quote from the Dr. John A. Schindler person. He says, regardless of the omissions and commissions of the past, a person has to start in the present to acquire some maturity so that the future may be better than the past. You have to start right here, right now. Okay, the present and the future depend on learning new habits and new ways of looking at old problems. If you keep looking at the same problem and coming up with the same conclusion, you're never going to change anything, right? We know this. Okay. So looking at old problems, new ways of looking at old problems. There simply isn't any future in digging continually in the past. Stop living in the past. The underlying emotional problems has the same common denominator in every patient. This common denominator is that the patient has forgotten how, or probably never learned how, to control his present thinking to produce enjoyment. And then if you want to find out more about that guy, the Dr. John A. Schindler, apparently he wrote a book called How to Live 365 Days a Year. Inglewood Cliffs, New Jersey, Prentice Hall, Inc. Okay, so let's jump into Let Sleeping Dogs Lie. This is kind of interesting right here. So the fact that there are buried in the unconscious memories of the past failures, unpleasant and painful experiences does not mean that these need to be dug out and examined or exposed in order to effect personality changes. As we have pointed out earlier, all skill learning is accomplished by trial and error, by making a trial, missing the mark, consciously remembering the degree of the error, and making correction on the next trial until finally a hit or a successful attempt is accomplished. The successful reaction pattern is then remembered or recalled and imitated on future trials. So trial and error, but you got to remember the wins, right? Problem is, a lot of us, we fail, we stop there, and the only thing we can remember is the fail. That's the problem. Fall down 7 times, get up 8. Finish until you're finished. Okay. All servo mechanisms, by their very nature, contain memories of past errors, failures, painful, and negative experience. But don't use those negative experiences and memories. He says use those to contribute to the learning process as long as they are used properly as negative feedback data and deviations from the positive goal desired. This is where he comes in and pretty key. He says, however, as soon as the error has been recognized as such and correction, of course, made, it is equally important that the error be consciously forgotten and the successful attempt be remembered and dwelt upon. So seriously, start thinking about all the good things and all the wins in your life and think about those more often than the time that, you know, you got rejected on a date or somebody didn't want to take you to the prom, or just don't think about those things, right? Think about the wins that you've had. Okay, these memories of the past failures do not harm as long as our conscious thought and attention is focused upon the positive goal to be accomplished. So they can't hurt you. These bad negative thoughts can't hurt you as long as you're focused on the positive goal and you just say, okay, that didn't work. That's a learning experience. That didn't work, but I'm not going to hold on to that. I'm going to keep focusing on what I really want to get to. Okay. Our errors, mistakes, and failures, humiliations, they were necessary steps in the learning process, but they should be forgotten. Unwittingly, the error or the failure becomes the goal itself because if you keep focusing on it, consciously feel guilty about the error or dwelling upon the error, berating ourselves on the error, then it becomes the goal, and that's what you're reinforcing into your well, I call it subconscious mind, but the servo mechanism, right? Blah, blah, let's see. Okay, the unhappiest of mortals is a man who insists on reliving the past over and over in his imagination. So basically, he's criticizing himself for past mistakes and continually condemning himself for past sins. Stop living in the past, especially things that weren't good. Think of how you want it to be and how positive and happy and think of the best. Otherwise, you're going to just keep reliving the past. Okay, and then he talks about this one lady example, but you guys don't really need it. Basically, she was really cranky, and then she had a surgery which fixed her hair lip, and then other people still were like not cool with her because she had been so cranky, and her attitude, it was her attitude of being so mean to everybody because she thought they were going to be mean to her because of her hair lip. And even after she fixed her hair lip, like people were like, yeah, whatever, forget you. So yeah, anyway, we don't really need to do too much of that. This is not to prove that unconscious reaction patterns have any power in themselves to repeat and perpetuate themselves. So memories of past failures can adversely affect present performance if you dwell on them foolishly. But he's saying all buried memories of failure must be eradicated before behavior can be changed. If we are victimizing, okay, this is pretty big. If we are victimizing, it is by our conscious thinking mind and not by unconscious. Okay, so if we are victimized, for it is with the thinking part of our personality that we draw conclusions and select the goal images that we shall concentrate upon. So our conscious mind is the one selecting the goal images. So that's on us, right? The minute that we change our minds and stop giving power to the past, with all of its mistakes, it starts to lose power over us. Okay. Whoops. Okay. Ignore past failures and forge ahead. Okay, so in hypnosis, when they tell a wallflower that, you're bold and you're self-confident and you're an orator and you can speak in front of people, as long as that hypnosis person believes and thinks that this is true, his reaction patterns are changed instantly. And he currently acts as he currently believes, okay? And his attention is given over completely to the positive desired goal, and no thought or consideration whatsoever is given to past failures. So like, as soon as they believe it, they start acting on it. And you've seen this if you ever watched some hypnosis stuff, like you're like, whoa, cool, right? So and then he has this example, Dorothea Brand, and she has a book called Wake Up and Live. And she was thinking about this whole hypnosis thing, and she's like, okay, why couldn't a person in the wakeful state use these same powers by ignoring past failures and acting as if it were possible to fail. And actually, if you start like reading other things similar to this, you're going to hear the act as if. You've even heard it numerous times when people tell you dress for the job you want, right? Just dress for success, dress for the job you want, act as if. Those are all in line, but we don't, we kind of think, oh, no, whatever. So start looking at all these things and where you've seen them and heard them in your normal everyday life. Okay. So anyway, so this Dorothea Brand lady, she was determined to try it, and she would act upon assumptions that the powers and abilities were there and that she could use them if only she would go ahead and act as if, all in caps, right? Act as if, instead of tentative, half-hearted way. So basically, don't half-ass it, like go for it, right? Okay, and then this other guy, Bertrand Russell, Conquest of Happiness, he wrote a book that's Conquest of Happiness. And he describes his method for changing automatic reaction patterns based on false beliefs. It is quite possible to overcome infantile suggestions of the unconscious and even to change the contents of the unconscious by employing the right kind of technique. Okay. So, and now he's getting into like guilt trips, right? So if you have any of those wonderful guilt trips, this is going to be something you might want to listen to. So whenever you begin to feel remorse for an act which your reason tells you is not wicked, examine the causes of your feelings of remorse and convince yourself in detail of their absurdity. Like, how absurd is that belief that I'm holding? Why am I thinking that? Okay, let your conscious belief be so vivid and emphatic, like so strong, that they make an impression upon your unconscious strong enough to cope with the impressions made by your nurse or your mother when you were an infant. Remember, this whole feeling thing is like super important in all of this. You have to feel it. You have to have the emotions because that's what sets it in there. He's going to get to that again soon. Okay, so cope with the impressions made by your nurse or your mother when you were an infant. Do not be content with alteration between moments of rational and moments of irrational. Look into the irrational closely and determine not to respect it and not to let it dominate you. When it thrusts foolish thoughts or feelings into your conscious, pull them up by the roots, examine them, and reject them. Do not allow yourself to remain vacillating creatures, swayed half by reason and half by infantile folly. So don't let yourself be oscillating back and forth. That's just nonsense. But if the rebellion is to be successful in bringing individual happiness and enabling a man to live consistently by one standard and not vacillate between the two, it is necessary that he should think and feel deeply about what his reasons tell him. So you got to think about what is rational, what does reason tell you? Because you have these beliefs and you're going to have to start calling them in check and being like, why do I have that belief? Or what exactly is that belief? And rationally tell yourself that's pretty much a load of BS. And just dissect it like that, right? Okay, most men, when they have thrown off, let's see if I care about that. Oh, so basically he talks about superficially and superstitions of their childhood. So after they throw those off, they do not realize that these superstitions are still lurking underground. Okay, then he says, when a rational conviction, so you have a rational, like, yeah, this is true, this is where I'm at. When a rational conviction has been arrived at and is necessary to, it is necessary to dwell upon it, to follow out its consequences and search out in oneself whatever beliefs inconsistent with the new conviction might otherwise survive. So once you have the rational, like, I am good enough, I am worthy, I am whatever, you have to start finding out where are all those underlying subliminal things that go against that is what he's getting at. So where they survive. What I suggest is that a man should make up his mind with emphasis, again, feeling, as to what he rationally believes, and should never allow contrary irrational beliefs to pass unchallenged or obtain a hold over him, no matter how brief, right? And you're gonna hear other people totally telling you, like, guard your mind, guard everything that goes in your mind, guard your own thoughts in your own head about yourself, like, guard everything, pay attention. So if you're just zoning out and like watching TV, and magazines and media and all that stuff and just like buying into all that stuff, then you're not guarding your mind. You're just like taking it in. Even if you're not thinking about it, you are taking it in. Okay? Blah, blah. Okay. So Bertrand Russell's technique, it's similar to Prescott Lecky. Prescott Lecky, remember, he was the guy, he was in the school and he kind of figured out, well, here, I'll tell you exactly what he figured out. Okay, so back to page 4. He was the one, Prescott Lecky, one of the pioneers of self-image psychology. Lecky conceived of the personality as a system of ideas, all of which must seem to be consistent with each other. Ideas which are inconsistent with the system are rejected, not believed, and not acted upon. Ideas which seem to be consistent with the system are accepted. At the very center of this system of ideas, the keystone, the base upon which all else is built, is the individual's ego ideal, his self-image, or his conception of self. Lecky was a school teacher, and and basically he was the one when the kids said, "Oh, I'm stupid, I'm dumb," then they would act it out and get dumb grades because they had to be consistent. Remember that guy? That's what he's talking about. Okay, so he's basically saying Bertrand Russell, he's hitting on the same point as Lecky. And then he says, Lecky's method consisted of getting subjects to see that some negative concept of his some negative concept of his, oh my goodness, that some negative concept of his was inconsistent with some other deeply held belief. So you've got opposing things, and one of them's going to win. Figure out which one is winning and what you want to win, and then work on it. All right. Lecky believed that it was inherent in the very nature of the mind itself that all ideas and concepts which make up the total concept of personality must seem to be consistent with each other. If the inconsistency of a given idea is consciously recognized, it must be rejected. It must be rejected. Okay. And then, this is going to be a good example. This one we're going to go through for sure, because he has a patient who was a salesman and he was scared to death, and he had fears and nervousness when he was basically going to go out and sell. And so then he just told him in one counseling session, he basically fixed that with logic. And he's like, would you physically get down on all fours and crawl into that man's office and prostrating yourself before that superior personage? And the guy's like, I should say not, he bristled. Like, I love how these guys talk, right? Anyway, and then he says, then why do you mentally cringe and crawl? Like, why do you feel inferior, right? And then he says another question. Would you go into a man's office with your hand out like a beggar and beg for a dime for a cup of coffee? And he said, certainly not, right? So this guy's like, hell no, I'm not going to do that. He's like, can you see that you are doing essentially the same thing when you go in overly concerned with whether or not he will approve of you? Okay? Like, why are you looking for his approval of you? Can't you see that you have your hand out, literally begging for his approval and acceptance of you as a person? That's where the logic is like, stop doing that. You wouldn't do this. So Lecky found that there are two powerful levers for changing beliefs and concepts. So there are standard conventions which are strongly held by nearly everyone. So number one, the feeling or belief that one is capable of doing his share, holding up his end of the log, exerting a certain amount of independence. Okay, so you're able to do things. You are capable. And number two, the belief that there is something inside you which should not be allowed to suffer indignities. Okay. So basically, get up, stand up, do it. Okay. Examine and reevaluate your beliefs. Oh, okay. So one of the reasons that the power of rational thinking, goes unrecognized, that is so seldomly used. Trace down your beliefs, what's behind your negative behavior. And if you are one of those people who say, oh, something always happens, something always goes wrong, well, that's a negative belief, that's a negative behavior, and perhaps you're secretly feeling unworthy, or that you don't deserve success, or that you're feeling inferior, or that the world is hostile and unfriendly, and you're anxious and fearful for no good reason. Like, all of these beliefs that you have, that the world is a hostile, unfriendly, dangerous place, or that you deserve punishment. Remember that both beliefs and feelings spring from, both behaviors and feelings spring from belief. Okay, and I think there was something by Einstein. There's a quote about the question is, do you believe that you live in a friendly or non-friendly environment? Because it's going to basically change your lens on how you see the world and how you see things working out for you or against you. And then that's going to keep playing into this, right? But maybe I'll try to find that quote later. Maybe not. Okay. To root out the belief in which is responsible for your feeling and behavior, ask yourself why. So when you find out that something's kind of like feeling off, like you're like, what the hell is going on here? Ask yourself why. And then this is pretty cool because he goes into this. He says, don't skip that. Okay. Is there some task which you would like to do, some channel in which you would like to express yourself, but you hang back feeling, I can't? He says, ask yourself why. Why do I believe that I can't? Then ask yourself, is this belief based upon actual fact or assumption or a false conclusion, right? Like, is it a fact or are you just like shizzing it up? And then ask yourself these 4 questions. Is there any rational reason for such a belief? Is there anything rational that makes this true? Could it be that I am mistaken in this belief, right? Would I come to the same conclusion about some other person in a similar situation? Why do we feel that someone else can totally do it, but we can't? Why do we always do stuff like that? Number 4, should I continue to act and feel as if this were true if there were no good reason to believe it? So once you prove to yourself that this is not true, why am I still believing it? Why am I still acting as if this is true? Okay, don't just pass these questions casually. Think hard on them, like really wrestle with them, get into them, get emotional about them. Again, back to feelings, right? Can you see that you have cheated yourself and sold yourself short? Not because of fact, but only because of some stupid belief. He actually wrote that. Sounds like something I'd say. So try to arouse some indignation and even anger. Indignation and anger can sometimes act as liberators from false ideas. Basically, he starts going to examples of when people get so pissed off that they say, I'm done with that. And they just start moving in a new direction. And hopefully you have done that at some point, some way, right? Okay, blah, blah, blah. So rational thought. Man, okay. Rational thought, to be effective in changing belief and behavior, it must be accompanied by deep feeling and desire. It keeps going back to feeling. Like this has to be this has to have an emotional context. Has to, because that's how it gets seeded in. Okay? Picture to yourself what you would like to be and have, and assume for the moment that such things might be possible. So assume you can have it and that it's real. Arouse a deep desire for those things, become enthusiastic about them, dwell on them, and keep going over and over them in your mind. Your present negative beliefs were formed by thoughts plus feelings. So the negative beliefs that we have now, that's how you made them. You just kept thinking about them and having emotions with them. So he says your present negative beliefs were formed by thought and plus feelings. Generate enough emotions or deep feelings with your new thoughts, and ideas will cancel themselves out. Okay, the ideas will eventually cancel, but you got to work on this. Like you cannot just do it one day and think you're going to get anywhere. How long have you been thinking these things? It's going to take some work, and it's going to take some actual looking at stuff and what the heck's going on. Okay, if you analyze this, you will see that you're using a process you have often used before. Worry. Okay, this is key because if you're not getting this, check this out, and you're going to be like, holy shiznit. Okay, the only difference is, so he's talking about worry, right? The only difference is you change your goals from negative to positive. So, negative is the worry part. So he's going to give you the example of worry, and we can all relate to this. When you worry, you first picture some undesirable future outcome or goal, or very vividly, and you can picture it very vividly in your imagination. You use no effort or willpower, but you keep dwelling upon it and upon the end result. You keep thinking about it, dwelling upon it, picturing it to yourself as a possibility. You play with the idea it might happen. You're just worried about it. This constant repetition and thinking in terms of possibilities makes the end result appear more and more real to you. Okay, it starts getting realer. Those are like probably not really English words. After a time, appropriate emotions are automatically generated. Emotions, feelings, right? Fear, anxiety, discouragement. These are all appropriate to the undesirable end result you are worrying about. Now, okay, now use that same thing, but now change the goal picture and you can easily generate good emotions. Constantly picturing to yourself and dwelling upon a desirable end result will also make the possibility seem more real. And again, appropriate emotions of enthusiasm, cheerfulness, encouragement, and happiness will automatically be generated. Like, yeah, we did it with worry. We can do it with something positive. In forming good emotional habits and in breaking bad ones, Dr. Knight Dunlap, and he says this, he's like, we have to deal primarily with thought and thought habits. And then also he quotes, as a man thinketh in his heart, so he is. And there's a book called As a Man Thinketh. And maybe we'll do that, but I think I want to do like Green Eggs and Ham or something a lot lighter, seriously. Okay, remember that your automatic mechanism can easily function as a failure mechanism or a success mechanism, depending on the data you give it to process and the goals you set for it. She's eating. Okay. It is basically a goal-striving mechanism. The goals it works upon are up to you. You are feeding it now. Like if you're old enough to be old enough, you're feeding it. You're no longer getting all this stuff from your environment. So you are picking your own goals. Many of us unconsciously and unwittingly, by holding negative attitudes and habitually picturing failure to ourselves in our imagination, set up goals of failures. That's why that happens. Also, remember that your automatic mechanism does not reason about nor question the data you feed it. So whatever you feed it, it's going to take it as truth, as gospel. It merely processes and reacts appropriately to it. Okay, so now this is kind of cool. He starts talking about what the job is of the conscious mind, and I circled all of them so we'll make those key points. It's important that the automatic mechanism be given true facts concerning the environment. Has to be true. Can't be stuff you just made up. Can't be stuff that people told you and you just bought into. Has to be true stuff. Okay? Facts about concerning the environment. This is the job of the conscious rational thought. To know the truth, to form correct evaluations, estimations, and opinions. That is your job as a conscious mind. Again, if you're like totally zoning out and watching TV and like just sucking in a whole bunch of nonsense, you are not being conscious at that point and you're just taking it all in. So be careful who you're around, what you're ingesting, like just pay attention. Okay, in this connection with most of us are prone to underestimate ourselves and overestimate the nature of the difficulty facing us. Always think of what you have to always think of what you have to do as easy and it will become so. And that's a quote said by Émile Coué. I need someone French to tell me how to say that guy's name. Okay, so blah, blah, blah. And then this Daniel W. Jocelyn, and basically people, when they get to a point where they're freeze in their own mind, it's just because they believe they can't. And so they act out that they can't, basically. Okay, back to the jobs, right? So it is the job of the rational conscious thought to examine and analyze incoming message, to accept those which are true and reject those which are untrue. Again, key, job of the rational conscious mind thought is to examine and analyze incoming messages, to accept those which are true and reject those which are untrue. This is huge. Stop buying everything you're told and stop believing everything you say to yourself, because you might be repeating stuff to yourself that's just not true. Many people are bowled over by the chance remarker of a friend, you do not look so well this morning. And then they start believing it and they start acting on it. They blindly swallow the fact that this means they are an inferior person if they are rejected or snubbed by someone. They just take it like, oh God, oh, that must be me. Most of us are subjected to negative suggestions every day. If our conscious mind is working on the job, we do not have to accept them blindly. It ain't necessarily so is a good model. And you're going to hear other people say, guard the door to your mind. That's your conscious mind. You have to be engaged and you have to be aware of everything that's going on and guard the door to your mind all day, every day. And then it'll get easier and easier, but you got to do it every day. You can never let up. Okay, it is the job of the conscious rational mind to form logical and correct conclusions. You have to be logical. You have to be rational. You have to have correct and truth and fact. So if you failed once in the past, I'll probably fail in the future. That's neither logical nor rational. And if you conclude I can't in advance without even trying or with the absence of any evidence to the contrary, that is not rational. So we should be more like the man who was asked if he could play the piano, and he said, I don't know. And so then the guy asked him, what do you mean you don't know? And he's like, I've never tried. I love that. I love that. As opposed to, I can't play the piano. Well, no, I haven't taken lessons. I haven't looked into it. I haven't spent a lot of time on it. I haven't done anything. So yeah, I don't know because I haven't tried. That's a good one. Easy. That one's easy to relate to. It is the job of conscious rational thought to decide what you want. Select the goals you wish to achieve and concentrate upon these rather than upon what you do not want. To spend time and effort concentrating upon what you do want is not rational. Why are you wasting time thinking about stuff you don't want? Totally not good, not helpful. Okay, again, back to the job of your conscious mind is to pay strict attention to the task at hand, to what you are doing and what is going on around you, so that these incoming sensory messages can keep your automatic mechanism currently advised of the environment and allow it to respond spontaneously. And so basically keep your eye on the ball is what he's saying. Like, pay attention, stay aware, like take it in and figure out what is true, what is not true, and just stay on it. And if someone else's energy changes, like if you start getting feelings that someone is being dishonest or whatever, or slimy, pay attention to those feelings. Don't just be like, oh no, he'd never do that, she'd never do that, they're a good person. Pay attention. Okay. It is not the job, okay, this is where he says it's not the job of your conscious rational mind, however, to create or to do the job at hand. We get into trouble when we either neglect to use conscious thinking in the way that is meant to be used, or when we attempt to use it in a way that it was never meant to be used. We cannot squeeze creative thought out of the creative mechanism by making conscious effort. We cannot do the job to be done by making strained conscious efforts. And because we try and cannot, we become concerned, anxious, and frustrated. Okay, so here, the automatic mechanism is unconscious. So you feed all this data into it and then you let it do the work. We cannot see the wheels turning. We cannot know what is taking place beneath the surface. And because it works spontaneously in reacting to present and current needs, we can have no intimation or certified guaranteed in advance that it will come up with the answer. But you have to kind of trust. You just have to trust. We are forced into a position of trust. Yeah, so you have to trust. I didn't just make that up. And only by trusting and acting do we receive signs and wonders. Okay, you start getting like gut feelings and hunches and nudges in the right direction of where you're supposed to be going, and things will present itself to you, and things will start getting easier, and you'll see it better visually. Okay, in short, conscious rational thoughts select the goals. They gather your conscious rational thought selects the goals, gathers information, concludes, evaluates, estimates, and starts the wheels in motion. It is not, however, responsible for the results. We must learn to do our work, act upon the best assumptions available, and leave the results to take care of themselves. Okay, so if this is kind of weird, try it out on something small, something in your garden, something that, you know, whatever. Work on the beginning of just visualizing it, seeing it, imagining, changing in your mind until you finally figure out kind of what you want. And then you start working on it. And it's kind of funny because you'll start seeing things fall together and you'll be like, whoa, right? Like I had to clear out a whole bunch of stuff. So I came across this guy and I gave him all the stuff that I needed to get moved. And then I really wanted something planted in here and I came across a different guy and I got tons of that to plant in here. So hopefully those root and take off. So it's kind of weird, kind of different, but just try it with something that, you know, you can give that freedom to and trust yourself, because it's really actually pretty interesting if you start playing with this stuff and seeing how it works. Okay, so everybody have a super fantastic, wonderful day, and do something today that your future self will be thankful you did.